like trap ourselves in time and like imprison ourselves with time in a lot of ways. When I think on the other hand, or at least I know, I feel like from my own experience, that time can be really empowering, or it can be really empowering to improve your relationship with time and like better understand time.
I agree. I think having a healthier relationship to time is something I've been exploring over the past few years, and it's very challenging to do because within our society, I feel we think of ourselves as finite and not infinite. And I think that that has a very significant part in the perception of time.
That's probably the biggest part.
Yeah.
Like, time isn't scary when you perceive yourself as infinite. But if you know like time is fleeting and you're going to die and that's going to be the end of it, like then yeah, time is going to be really scary because you only get so much of it. And I think like the ego only gets so much time because the ego only knows itself in linear time and it knows the clock is ticking.
Yeah. Right. And for me, it's been a really hard concept to grasp that time is really a construct that we have here on Earth. It is like a reality to learn and grow through, and it's beneficial in cases of lunar cycles and the eclipses and then days and weeks and like the 24 hours of a day and how it's tied to our circadian rhythm. And it makes sense. Like, oh, okay. Yes, fundamentally, what a genius a concept this is to learn through here. But because I've had such a distorted view of time, which again, I think most people do, is that yes, I think it's limited, and what I'm focusing on of that time and the almost too human aspect of it is like wanting to be somewhere other than the now present moment. That's really the only thing that's here.
Yeah. I think it's something really interesting about perceiving time as a location or like a measure of distance. Because I think that completely changes it.
Yes, and I agree, and I wholeheartedly praise Joe Dispenza for explaining this in that sense of when you're in the meditations that he, instructs. It's not even the meditations. He actually like says this in his lectures and his books and his teachings, and then like in the meditations it makes sense. And you can probably describe it better than I can. But yes, like we think we're separate. We think that we're not all connected because like you're here and I can see you, I perceive you, and like to get to you, I mean, we're so close, it would take one step, but and looking out at a window and there's a house across the street, it would take me 15 seconds to walk there, and that's the time. It's a time between things that are distant and what we perceive in this manifest world through our eyes. That's what we equate, but we're not moving through time, we're moving through space.
Yes.
And I'm not doing it justice to explain it because I can understand it in my mind, but it's hard to talk about.
It's hard. It is a hard thing to, I think, put words to, because it's you need to view it from a higher dimensional perspective to grasp it. Because from our perception as a human on Earth, like time is just whipping by and it's just happening. And that we have the idea that we're in place and time is moving past us. And when we view time as flowing past us, you can't get enough of it. It's always fleeting, it's always scarce, it's always like there's always not enough. But from a higher dimension, us right now talking about this and then us a minute ago talking about this would be next to each other. Or like there'd be two different locations. And that even though we didn't move at all, we didn't even move through space. Well, we did because like the Earth is moving through space, but like we didn't perceive moving through space, but we did move through different moments. And I think like the more you think about that and like contemplate it and meditate on it, it changes the way that you relate to everything. Because then you like when you can start to perceive everything as individual moments and not one continuous happening, then there's like you start to realize you have more control over your own life and your own destiny.
Yes.
It's like you don't need to like go do things and make things happen in the same sense that we think of ourselves as like battling against time. But it's not like time works for you when you realize that it's more of it's an internal battle against, or not even against, but like it's like an understanding of and
understanding, as Dr. Christian would say.
Yeah.
I've been trying to work on that.
It's like
literally
it's an understanding. It's exactly what it is, because it's like this internal. I don't know. I'm like struggling to think of the right word for it, because I don't want to call it like a battle or a fight, but it's just like there's something happening on the inside where we have the opportunity to better understand and understand ourselves and our emotions and our consciousness.
About a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I was reading the book. I believe it's called The Greatest Leap, or The Leap by Gay Hendricks.
The Big Leap?
The Big Leap, yes. And he quotes, I think it's Einstein in it, says, we are the creators of time. As we create everything. And that was the light bulb moment for me, because I had such a distorted and unhealthy relationship with time. I couldn't understand any of this. And I'm constantly like worrying and fearing and being like, okay, like I don't have this, like I don't have a house, I don't have kids, not that that's what I want, but just people listening that, or I don't have like X amount of money, or I don't have this, and this. There's no time. There's no time in the day. I have so many things that I have on my to-do list, like I can't possibly get them done. Like I had a very distorted view of time, which was giving me lots of anxiety that I'd experienced and worry. And then reading that line, like you are the creator of time, as we are. That's exactly what I said. We created, as we are all in this co-creation together, in an agreement to time to learn and grow through and to understand. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I'm the one who's creating a story about time being limited.
Yes.
Oh shit, okay. And I'm still unpacking this. A year and a half, if not 2 years later, the contemplation keeps unfolding and my awareness of it keeps growing, and more lectures and teachers and understandings about this time concept is coming into my reality and our reality to better learn it. But if I didn't read that one line in that sentence, I don't think it would have clicked. You are the creator of time. Like, oh my gosh. So I have been limiting my time because I'm saying there's not enough. Yes, I don't have anything. Exactly, oh my gosh, there's only 24 hours in a day. Like I forget. We all forget how powerful we truly are. And our mind that says it is in agreement to everything we think. Like, oh, okay, you don't have enough time? Nope. The days fly by, the weeks fly by, the months fly by. And it's like, of course. I'm saying there's no time. It's speeding up continuously.
Yeah. I say real quick, that reminds me, like the way you're describing it reminds me of like the Emerson quote where it's like, nature never hurries, but nothing is left undone.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's exactly like only as humans who are creating the scarcity of time. And I think we can look at this from like a metaphysical standpoint where, and I feel like I try to explain this all the time, and I'm working on languaging it better, but like I had these like really profound like visions and experiences of this, where it's like from a metaphysical standpoint, the physical reality exists as an infinite number of moments. And I think of them as like individual slides or like frames, like framed photographs or pictures. There isn't moving time. And this we know this from a physics standpoint, that we actually everything is strobing. If everything is flickering, there's not a continuous stream of anything. Our brain is, or our mind, our brain is receiving flickering images. It's like 8 billion per second. It's really, really fast. Flickering still frames. And our mind is perceiving that as a film, as like a moving picture, just in the exact same way that a film projector rolls through slides of still frames, shines a light through them, and projects out onto the screen what seems like moving pictures. We don't notice the flickering because it's so fast. In our brain, this is happening so much faster than a movie projector. But it's the same idea. Same idea of like a flip book, and you just draw pictures on every page and flip through it, and it happens. It looks like a stick figure walking. It's the same technology. Everything that we create in this reality is just an expression of what we're actually experiencing in our mind, including like technology, like the internet or like a film projector. It is just what we're actually perceiving, and we're creating it. But back to this, to the idea, the metaphysical idea of explaining time is infinite potentials of everything that has ever existed, everything that could have ever existed, everything that will ever exist, and everything that could potentially ever exist. Like creation is finished, and all these single images exist. And what we do is move our perception and our awareness through that. And they're not set. So we're going through creating this reel of film as we go, based on our beliefs and our concepts of ourself and the concepts of the world, our feelings and our state of consciousness, our level of consciousness, like all these aspects of our consciousness and our mind are creating, calling in the next slide, and it's creating the reel of film as we go through the experience. And it's all just individual frames. So if we think about now, like all these frames just laid out infinitely, like we think of them as being linear in time, but then also everything was horizontal, but then also up and down of everything that could be happening at this time and all these different things. And then our consciousness is going through and choosing them and flowing through. And depending on the path you take, you end up in a completely different reality. But that reality is based on who we believe ourselves to be and how we believe the world to be and our overall level of consciousness. So if you lay all these possible moments out, those are time. Because if we have like a moment from 400 years ago, if we have a moment from like 1,000 years ago, if we have a moment from last week, if we have a moment, it takes time to get from one to the next. You can't just bounce around from one period to the next. Like in one moment, we'd lose our mind. If we were in like one moment we're like a caveman, and one moment we're a spaceman, like it just wouldn't make sense. So we can only experience a moment that we can actually conceptualize as realistic. So that's why we're limited by our conception of ourselves and of the world. But if we lay all these frames out all over the place, some of them are like, some frames would be a specific distance away. It could be another image that's 100 miles from here, but it could also be another image of this same location 100 years from now. So that's how like miles is one way to measure distance. Time is another way to measure distance. But it's just from a higher dimensional standpoint, you would be able to see everything. I think a good analogy for this is if you think of like the author of a book. They write the story out and they have like all these different pages. And they can go from one to the next and make corrections and edits and change it and change parts of the story. And it changes the story, but it doesn't change the flow of time. Because the author isn't stuck in the linear time of the story because he's at a higher dimension where he knows it all. So this is making sense, right? I feel like
yes,
like it's coming
to me it is
good. Yeah,
no, you were doing it very good.
Yeah, but I think that's like when we start to recognize time in that sense, I think at least for me, it's drastically changed my perception of time being fleeting and scarce, and that, like you're saying, like there's not enough time, I'll never be able to do it, is they know there's the perfect amount of time. Because exactly how much time I need. We literally go through those slides depending on our like level of focus and intention is the speed at which we go through them. So it could be, it's like 1 minute in this time, but if we're doing something where we're like really engrossed in it and like really passionate about it, we have plenty of time to get it done. If we're like, no, I'm never going to get it done, the time clicks by faster because we're like narrowing in on the negative, this isn't done, rather than really embracing the doing of it and the process. And when you're like immersed in the process, there's always enough time to get it done. When you're focused on the deadline, time goes by really fast because it's like you can kind of think of it like you're like literally just going like headfirst through these things, speeding up because your focus is on a particular slide that's in the future. So you're collapsing time, and that's speeding up. And I think that's what so many of us are doing, where you talk to people all the time and it's like, this week flew by, I don't know what happened, because you're so focused on the weekend that all of a sudden it's the weekend again. But then the weekend comes around and you're so focused on like, oh, Monday I have to work, and then the weekend flies by and nobody ever like really immerses themselves in the process of enjoying and being. And when we're just being, like you have those days where you're just sitting around, but you're enjoying yourself. And it feels like the day just takes forever. Or you're doing something that you love doing. You're busy and occupied, but it's like, what? It's already 8 o'clock. Like I feel like this day lasted 3 days. And it's like, time is relative.
Yeah, I love it. I think that you did a great job explaining that. I actually really loved your analogy of the writer and the storytelling book. That's like at an even deeper level, like that's who we are. We are the storytellers of our lives. We're the creators of our lives. And this is what we're talking about here. It's really empowering when we begin to understand, oh, we're creating time. We're also creating our story in relation to time. And that is it. Like, I feel like we're really going to focus more and more on this in the episodes that you and I tape. Like, this is how we create our reality. We must understand this. Every single aspect of our lives is created through the story that we're telling about our lives. And that's not, it's so simple, but can be challenging to change. Because if we're thinking of time in a linear fashion, as we do as humans, like the egoic nature of ourselves, it's linear. There's a past, there's a present, and there's a future. And what happens is because the ego's identity was based so much on our past through the absorption of energy at such a young age that it continued to do that, it believes that's what like the continuation of life will be. And we suffer because we're trying to inevitably avoid that painful past in a future that hasn't happened yet. So what happens is we miss the present moment and the present opportunity to change that story. As Peter Crone says, we're walking narratives. We are walking narrations of our life. That's it. It's a conversation in our head. It is language that's dictating every single aspect of our lives, because that's it. That's how the universe was created. In the beginning was the word. You speak it into existence. Yeah. It's, frequency, vibration, and energy, as Nikola Tesla said. Those are the three main pillars, the holy trinity of understanding what it is to be the creators of our life. But in order to do that, we must dissolve. We must dissolve the stories and the narratives that have gotten us to this place, because we cannot take that into the future. No, go ahead.
The narrative is time. It's literally like the narrative, like thinking is what creates time, because for this moment to be anything other than this moment would be kind of, I don't know, I want to make sure I word this right. When you're just in the moment is all that exists. But the moment you start thinking about the moment in relation to other moments, time exists.
Yes. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it, because I've studied this and I've understood it.
Of course. I know we've talked about this and stuff, but so it's like, if you can having that constant conversation in your head is what's creating the illusion of time and the feeling that there's not enough.
And not suffering.
Yes.
That's 1,000% suffering. And that was another major point that we wanted to talk about. It's we're creating for the story that we're talking about. It is kind of funny.
Absolutely.
We have to laugh. We have to laugh now. I can laugh now. I feel like I didn't laugh at first because I denied it. And my ego was like, what are you talking about? Like, look at all of the stuff that you've gone through in the past. Like, this has defined you. This is who you are. Like, we're trying to avoid this in the future. Like, I'm protecting you. And it got to a point where it's like, no, I'm going to rewrite that. If I had the capabilities and power to get me to where I am now through the stories that I told myself in all of the interactions and circumstances of life leading up to this moment in, 37 years, then I have the power to change it, or at least rewrite it. You can't go back in time and like change something that happened. Like, I cannot go back a year ago and change that my cousin died. Right. I can't do. If I could, trust me, I would. What I can do is change the story and the perspective that I have on that day and that moment. Yes. Because I cannot and do not want that really defining moment of what I see my life to be to bring me into like a depression and despair and just live in that grief. I wouldn't be remiss, and I don't think anybody would, we wouldn't judge you. People wouldn't judge me for it. Yes,
but that doesn't mean it's right.
Right. So I know that I must, or I at least want to, change the story that I have around that time, around what had happened, so that I can bring myself into a different future. Yes. Same thing with like childhood, same thing with the memories that I have with my parents, with friends, with my cousins, with my grandmother. So many of these people who have shaped the person who I am today, unbeknownst to them. They didn't technically do anything. They acted a certain way, and then I attached a story which had a certain meaning to me, and it became the identity that I hold and who I am today. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. I just made that up in my mind, because I observed this a lot, and you observed it too, being home for the last, in Massachusetts, being back in Massachusetts for the last 2 years. I call it home just because that's my childhood home. My mother would be like, oh, do you remember this time you did this, this, and this? And it was so fun. And I'd be like, what? No, I don't. Or my father would always do this. Oh my God, remember that time you told me this? I'm like, I look at you, I'd get in the car, like, did I say that? Like, I don't even recognize that person, like what he's telling me, like the verbiage, like, did I even use that? And to him, yes, like that's the version of me that he knows. I know a very different version. But if we were to say the same exact story, he'd tell it one way, I would tell another. Same thing with you and I. We have very different perspectives. Yeah. It's again that narrative. It's a story that we tell ourselves for our egos to filter it through the lens that they have created, the persona, the identity that they've created itself through, to learn through.
Yeah. Yeah, because nothing has any meaning except the meaning that we choose to assign to it.
Yes.
And that every moment, like you use the moment of like Nikki passing, is a good example of every moment contains everything within it. So that could be and is like one of the worst thing that ever happened in your life. It is equally the greatest catalyst for transformation that you've ever experienced in your life. And that is a thing that if you choose that to be the meaning of it, will completely change the trajectory of your life, which is what you're saying. I was going to make another point. No, I forget. But it's just like every single moment we choose the story that we are going to assign to it. What I was going to say is usually we don't realize that we are the one choosing to give meaning to things. So we get stuck. And then we get stuck on a particular timeline. Because like I was saying before, like we have infinite possibilities, but we only have access to the ones that we like truly believe are feasible and realistic. But as soon as you attach yourself to a particular meaning, you collapse away anything that goes contrary to that. So if you were to attach to that, the meaning of that being the worst thing that ever happened, you lose all the future timelines that are attached to it being the catalyst for transformation. And then that they just go away and you don't have access to it anymore. And you limit yourself and you collapse your consciousness down to a single point of view. And a point of view is just a single timeline. And then we're back to suffering because we created time and then we used it to imprison ourselves.
Exactly. I was going to bring it back to this is how we suffer. Mm-hmm. You read that. Exactly. There is this suffering around like I said, the story, the narrative that we've created and it's all from the past. Mm-hmm. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. And I've mentioned this on the show before. I had this intuitive download, probably 2 years ago. I think it was while we were in Massachusetts. The past is here to teach us, not trap us. It's here to teach me. It's not here to trap me. And that's where the suffering comes. We attach ourselves to the old stories, the old identities that are ready to be let go and shed and dissolve. But because our ego only wants us to remain the same because it has created that one identity for us, we get stuck, and we almost get stuck in time. Because then we feel like this suffering and this immense guilt and grief and shame and like trauma and really horrible circumstances from our past that were there to, again, teach us, not trap us. The ego traps it. Yeah. And it's like, oh my gosh, yes, you're shit out of luck. There's no more time. And what does it try to do? It tries to avoid what has happened in the past that's now happening right now into a future that it's wanting to be different. Mm-hmm. And it's like this never ending cycle of not actually being with what has happened. So we're uncomfortable from everything that's happened in our past, all of the stories that we've created around our circumstances and life's happenings. And we're like, oh shit, okay, like, oh my, like I'm not happy, like I'm not supposed to be here, like all of these traumatic instances happen, woe is me, like I don't know, oh my gosh, but okay, like I know that it can get better. And when it's gonna get better is gonna be in the future. I'm getting there, I'm gonna do all these things, but like I'm not there yet. And I know that time is going to help me here. Like, I'm just going to be a different version in 5 years, in 10 years. I'll have the big house. I'll have all the kids and the cars and the perfect partner, the perfect body. And then we project it into a future that hasn't happened. So like, it's that continuation of the ego thinking like, all right, your past was shit, but don't you worry. Your future is going to be better if you just do it like this way. Keep being who you are and just hoping, just praying that it's going to be better in the future. And that's where the trap comes in, because it's really, really, really convincing.
Yeah, it's like soothing. It's like you can have that like, oh, it's gonna be all right. I know there's a version of me 10 years from now that has it all figured out, and I'm gonna be so happy when I get there.
Yeah, and I don't want to negate or to dismiss anybody who's visualizing and has goals and things. That is 100% I think a prerequisite to actually understand how this time continuum works and how the stories actually play out, because I don't think that I would have gotten to this level of contemplation about time if I didn't have a visual or goal in mind of what I'm committed to this. I'm committed to being this version that I'm not yet, but I know it's happening. I can see the dissolution. I can see the unfolding. I can see the shedding of my skin as it's happening. But I also know that the future, I've never been there. I have never been in my future. No one has. And that's how good the ego is trying to convince us that it's gonna be good.
Right.
It's gonna, and no, wait a minute. How do I know that it's gonna be good? I don't. I have no idea if the past and everything that had happened over like a 1.5 year span, if that's actually the worst. That's the worst up until this moment. I have no idea what's going to happen in 5 minutes, let alone 5 years or 50 years. Hopefully I will be alive in 50 years. I don't know that. But right now, all that I know is I am able to change the relationship that I have to the past, to the time that already has happened, through the story that I tell myself. And if I can rewrite the stories and my perspective of what happened in this present moment, that will help me get to a future that I desire most, as opposed to recreating a past moment by moment, harping on a story, on a narrative of a perspective that's really detrimental to my overall well-being, health, wellness, mindset, everything.
Yeah. Look, I love like the idea of is like, what was the exact quote you said? Because like that we're like running from or trying to avoid a past.
Did I say?
Or we're trying to avoid a past that's already happened in hopes to get to a future, a better future that also hasn't happened yet. Yeah. Like the past, the quote that I was using is the past is here to teach us, not trap us. But like the example that I was using is the past is dictating the present. And that's the continuation of, we're trying to avoid a past, like a hurtful past, and projecting that into a future that hasn't happened. But we don't know. None of us have ever been in our future. So we really don't know how it's going to be. We're just hoping that the future is better than this present moment. Yeah. But my revelation is, wait a minute, the present moment is all that there is. I'm narrating my story. I'm dictating the past and my relationship to it. I'm telling the story of my past and every circumstance that happened in the present moment. Like I said, I can't go into the past. The only way that I can go into the past is to change the story, to change my perspective of it. And how does that happen? In the present moment, the here, the now, as Ram Dass says. Be here now. I've never understood that more until now. It's like, oh, okay. Shut everything down. Shut it all down. Close my eyes. Sit in stillness. Be within the moment, the only moment that there is, which is now. That's dictating the past.
And that's hopefully helping me achieve what I pursue in the future.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to do that is the present. That's the only moment that there is now.
Yeah, there's only one moment. And this kind of comes back to the idea I was talking before. We have an infinite potential, infinite possible potentials of right nows. They're all right nows. And the only time that you ever experience any of them is when the light shines through it. And then it shines. That's the right now. When right now is here, right, it's right now. When right now is, a minute from now, it's going to be then. But if we keep bringing the stories from the past into right now and retelling the same story, then that's all our consciousness has to choose from. So of the next possible right now that we're able to perceive, we keep replaying the same one of everything was so bad, but eventually it's going to get better. Everything is so bad, but eventually it's going to get better. Everything's so bad, eventually it's going to get better. And we just keep playing that over and over, pushing the better part further and further away. Like, think about how many right nows have there been between whatever happened and right now. When we think about it in terms of time, it's infinite because there's I think the number's 8 billion times per second that it flicker rate. Like,
that's really long.
So many right nows. If you think about something that happened 10 years ago that you're still hung up on, that's so many right nows. It's even so many right nows from 5 minutes ago. But what we need to do is, instead of perpetuating that story, change our perception of it, like you're saying.
Yes.
And bring that into the present moment and be changed rather than just be the same. Because that's what I was thinking of. I like to use the terminology. We talked about this the other day. It was like thinking of time as just a perspective. And that each one of these right nows is just a perspective. So us right now at, whatever time this is on this day is a point of view. It's a perspective where from here, I can see myself in a way that I've never been able to see myself. And if I compare right now to me a year ago today, this exact same moment, but a year ago, I saw myself differently. I did not, there was a year's worth of right nows that I didn't have access to. So I wasn't able to see myself from this perspective. So I've never had this perspective before. So I can look back on every story I've ever told myself from a new perspective and recognize, like, oh, I thought that was terrible, but it's actually a transformative moment. And because of that, I have all these other potentials available to me. I grew. But I think we need to in order for that to be really transformational, we need to detach from it in a sense of not needing to be validated by what we went through, not needing people to feel sorry for us, not needing credit for something, like all these things that we get hung up on. Like, I know I can't move on. I need that person to forgive me, or I need that person to apologize, or I need that person to repay me, whatever. Like, no, because you're torturing yourself and you're suffering because you're attached to that moment energetically. So in this moment, you can't actually see yourself from the new perspective because you're only viewing yourself from that other perspective. But when we can let go of that and be like, I don't need anybody to repay me or say that they're sorry or do anything, because I learned the lesson from it. And from this perspective, I can see it just like the author looking at the book. And you can see, like, oh, I get it. This happened in the first chapter, but it works out because in the 7th chapter, he wins. Like, we can see the whole story. So if we can start to see our life from that aspect, like if you watched a movie or read a book, if you read a book and you read the last chapter first, then you go back and start it over. And it's like, okay, like the hero wins in the end. And then you just start the book from the beginning. No matter how bad it gets, you're never going to think, oh, the hero lost. Like, oh, it's like nothing's working out. I can't believe another tragedy and another tragedy. But I know with a capital K that it's all going to work out in the end. So I'm not going to get hung up on what happens in chapter 2 and chapter 3 because there's this knowing. We have that because we can, from this perspective, we can look back at our life and say like, oh, all that stuff happened, but I know that right now I'm here. And from here, I can do anything as long as I'm not hung up on that.
Yeah. And that's the fucking hard part.
Yes.
But yes,
Yeah.
I could not agree more. It's such an incredible feeling of empowerment to realize that, to have this tangible idea to contemplate and unfold, allow your life to unfold before you in this way. It's like, yes, there is, gosh, we're watching a video, like Tom Kieran said this, like, you're not obligated under any circumstance to be the same person that you were yesterday, a year ago, 15 years ago. You are under no obligation. It's just the identity, the ego identity, who wants to keep you the same because it's made you, it's attached itself to that.
Yeah, the ego values consistency.
Yeah.
And like that's such a trap, is this idea that we need to be consistent. It's like people are going to judge me if I act differently tomorrow than I did today. And it's like, what are people going to think? Like, people are going to think I changed. People are going to, and it's like, we use that as a prison.
Yes.
And it's like that, like, oh, like, what is everybody going to think?
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
It's literally something that I worry about. I contemplate about it all the time. People have told me like, oh, you've changed. And it's like, okay, but like, I appreciate that you really liked the version of Elise that you knew maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. Like, I really liked her too. But trust me, you do not want to know what that 8-year-old version of Elise would be like today. Like, I can't even imagine that. Like, she exists. She does. And I give her empathy, and who I'm like, that consciousness is in her and doing whatever is necessary for her growth and development. I've just chosen to let go of that story that was attached to that version because it wasn't serving me. And I tend to, and have very much worried about what people think of me. But then if I think about people thinking about me, I also recognize that their internal story is really about themselves. And then they're projecting onto me the changes that I've made because I continually want to grow. And so the judgment, it's really a judgment when you say like, oh, you've changed, but it also means, kind of like you're saying, like the ego likes consistency. Well, the ego likes the consistent people around them.
Yeah.
They like when, oh, I know Dan's going to act this way, or I know Elise is a yes girl and she's going to do everything that I say, or I know that this person's going to do this and help me with that. And the minute that you change, then the ego identity is like, wait a minute, Dan's not the same. Elise isn't the same. That's weird. And that's not okay. Because that doesn't fit within the ego's narrative that it developed about Dan and Elise.
Yeah, we use that against ourselves too. It's like the self-fulfilling prophecy, where we'll be like, oh, this isn't going to work out. Like, I'm going to do whatever. Like, I'm going to fail again. And then we try. And then we fail. And it's like, well, what did you expect? You thought you were just going to like magically succeed? You'll never succeed if your consciousness is focused on failing. But we do it like it's the same idea. Like I'm gonna miss. I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna trip, and then you trip, and it's like, well, I knew I was gonna do it. I'm not embarrassed. But like we like protect ourselves by not changing, so that we don't have to take risks. But it's the same idea, and that's the same thing when people around us start to change. It shines a light on us. It's like, oh wait, why aren't I changing? So then we'd rather shame them. Like, well, you changed. If you had just stayed like this, I would have been fine. Everybody would have been happy. But you ruined it because you changed.
I screenshotted this, gosh, years ago, maybe 6-7 years ago, when we were starting this like depth of inner journey. And it didn't have like, it didn't even have like an unknown. I don't know where this quote came from. It just like I remember the picture vividly. It was like a strobe light and then black and white writing, and it said, "Your light is going to trigger a lot of unhealed people."
Mm-hmm.
But I want to give credit where credit's due. I don't know, but that's it. That's exactly it. And I feel like I like where this is going, but to kind of tie it back into like time is on your side if you allow it to be.
Yes.
It
Yeah,
won't
and
be
that's
if
the
it's
point.
not.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's the point. And the reason why we suffer. Oh, this is where I wanted to go with it. Yeah, I feel like we went on a rabbit hole, but
My fault.
no. It's what the conversation needed and beautifully undertook. The suffering comes with also like knowing. I think that I sat in this for a while, and like I said, where the Ram Dass quote of "Be here now" is never hit at such a deep level in this. It's like, because I catch myself constantly trying to project myself into a future that hasn't happened, unbeknownst that what I am in right now, this moment, this circumstantial life that I have created is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It is literally perfect for the being that I am at this moment. Committed to the being that I'm becoming, and it's unfolding, that's happening later. But right now, like the life that I am living with you in this partnership, reflecting back to me everything that I require to learn and grow through, is perfect. No, I don't have $10 million in the bank. No, I don't have, we don't own a home. There's things that like I don't have that I could harp on and get like really upset about. Like, but there's amazing things in my life too that I forget to be so graciously appreciative for. There have been so many insane life lessons that I have learned recently that people don't even learn in a lifetime. And I am grateful that the soul that I am incarnated to experience all this, because I know it's helping me get to where I am looking to be. But without that, knowing in this moment, complete and total allowance of what is to unfold as it is, that is like gold. And that's where the suffering dissipates. Oh my gosh. Okay. When I detach myself from all of the stories, from all of the beliefs that I should be somewhere else, that I should be having something else. And I'm using the word should intentionally here. I know that, but that's the narrative of ego. You should be doing this. You should be actually living in Costa Rica right now. You should be hosting this. You should be doing that. You should have more money. You should have more followers. You should. Again, that creates anxiety, that creates worry, because there's feelings, there's stories attached to every one of those circumstances that I don't have, that send you spiraling into this despair. And so of course you get upset and sad, and there's grief and there's shame and there's guilt and there's anger for everything that you don't have, or that you think. No, what you have, what I have in my life right now is absolutely perfect for the evolution and elevation of the conscious being that I am becoming to experience.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. It reminds me of going back to Joe Dispenza. He talks about the idea of like no time and going into meditation. And there's nothing more frustrating than meditating when you are thinking about the thing you're going to do next and like needing to do something. And it's like the idea, like we've all done it. So like getting in, like you sit down in meditation, and it's almost like if I could just hurry up and be done with this meditation, then I could get to the stuff that's important. And it's like that's the whole point. Like meditation is so powerful when you let go of that. And it's like no matter what it is that has to happen when this is done, I'm not gonna do it right now, because right now I'm right now. I'm right here. And like fully letting go. And then when you do let go and you don't have that voice in your head telling you you need to be somewhere else, then there's no time. And you stepped outside of time because you're not worrying about getting to another place. Because time is just distance. And you're literally just, you're not moving, you're still. And in the stillness, there is no time. And the more we're able to tap into that and cultivate that, the more we realize time is like malleable. And the more we're able to use it to our advantage, like you said. And the other thing I wanted to say early, I think I was going to say something before and I like forgot what it was. And it was about, we say the words like change and transform. And we like, very often people use them interchangeably. We try to be intentional about it because I think they're two very different things. And I know like we've talked about this, but like change is like it's like in linear time. Change happens in linear time. It's like forcing matter to be different. It's a physical thing. Transformation is allowing yourself in the present moment to be something else, to bloom. And then as you do that, you open yourself up to new possibilities and new potentials that didn't exist before you transform.
Yeah, I think like the transformation, the way that I hear it and like see it, it's like an alchemical process. It's like not seen. And then you see it through the changes in the manifest world.
Yes. So that's, yeah, the changes happen around us. It's the changes are in the circumstances. Which is another fun word, circumstances. It's just the things that are around your stance. It's like you're in your stance, you're you, and then circumstancing is all the things around it. And those things are just a reflection of what's going on the inside. So as we transform what's on the inside, the circumstances around us are forced to change because we're choosing different slides. We're making better, our consciousness is open to new possibilities. We're expanding our consciousness instead of contracting and like squeezing it down. But I was thinking of the idea of like when we try to change things, that's more in line with what you were describing earlier of the idea of like having that future that's out in front of us. And we have the idea that we need to change to get to that. And then we assign time to it. And that's kind of like another Joe Dispenza talks about, where it's like, okay, this is what I want. I want to live in this house. I want my business to be doing like this much money per month. I want all these things. So to get from where I am now to where that is going to take this much time. And we assign like meaning to the time. Like, oh, well, that's obviously going to take 10 years.
Yeah.
But with a transformation, you become the version of yourself who is capable of having that stuff. And then you collapse time so that it becomes what I was saying before. It's like we start to perceive that as actually a realistic possibility, and then we take the steps. So there does need to be some sort of action taken to bridge the gap, where like we don't want to just keep projecting and keep saying like, well, in 10 years everything's gonna be fine, in 10 years everything's gonna be fine. We need to take action toward that intention, but it's action of becoming that version of ourselves, not of like acquiring things in the same sense that we think of. Like that's change, and change implies like the residue of the past, and we're like it's sticky and it's got all these stories attached to it. That's how you get from that traumatized version of yourself that wants validation for it to having the things that's going to get you the validation to make up for that moment in the ego story, in the linear time. And transformation is completely different because you don't need the change because the changes happen automatically once you've transformed yourself.
Yes, I was just about to say you can't change the ego with the ego.
Yes.
And that's exactly what's happening. I love that you had said that. Yes, it's really, and this is what I was mentioning, it's the dissolution process. The ego believes that it needs to do certain things. I need to make X amount of calls for sales. I need to make X amount of this. For that tangible outcome in 10 years. Okay, I'll do this. It's not the doing. It's the being. And the only way to be is to allow the transformation to happen. There's nothing to do but be. That is probably one of the biggest downloads I've gotten, and it continues to unfold because the ego again tricks you. Well, you're not doing anything. But it's like, I am doing things in a very intentional way. As you said, there are steps being taken, just probably not in the direction that the ego believes it's supposed to be going because of its narrative that it's told.
Well, that's like meditation, because so many people are like, I don't have time to meditate. And it's like, but it's like, that's what I'm saying. So like, and if those people in that state try to meditate, all they're doing is sitting there counting time. They're like, when is this meditation gonna be over? I have shit to do. I gotta get back to work. This is ridiculous. What a waste of time. I do not have time for this. But it's like, to actually meditate is the dissolution of that aspect of ourselves. That speeding up time and then complaining that there's not enough of it.
It's so crazy.
Right? Yeah, back to this ridiculous game that we play. But yeah, time is absolutely malleable, and it can be one of our greatest allies in this game.